first like lecture I had in AI in college, I was like, oh, this is amazing. Like, I want to work in this somehow in future. At the time, you had to kind of work in, like, you basically go do a PhD. That's how you work in AI back in, like, 2016 time. So basically, from an engineering perspective, like, it really caught me out. Like, I just fell in love with the engineering problem because
Yeah.
the main bottleneck for building, there's two bottlenecks really for building AI systems, but one of the main bottlenecks is labeling data. So you typically need a human to go like table, chair, microphone, laptop, and that's a massive bottleneck. With social media specifically, you don't have that bottleneck because all the content is inherently scored. So you have engagement metrics for social media. So you have like likes, comments, shares. So that means if a post goes up and it gets loads of likes, it's a great post. So then you can build some sort of system that goes, okay, cool, this is a good post, without having to actually label data yourself, which is really interesting from an engineering perspective. Because okay, cool, this unlocks so many possibilities.
Yes. Hello, everyone. Hi, James. So we have a super exciting episode for everyone today. And so today we have James Flynn in the house in Nova UCD. Excuse me. So James is the founder of Coso.ai, which is a social media co-pilot. So we will talk a lot more about that. And he's also a former site reliability engineer at Salesforce and has worked in cybersecurity at Susquehanna. So a lot of very cool experience. So welcome to Nova UCD, James.
Thanks, Leanna. How are you doing?
Good, very good. We got it started. We got it all sorted. So we're ready to go now. Okay, so I've asked this question of others also that have been on the podcast, but the very first thing is, tell me about yourself in the sense of, why did you get started in this area? Why did you get started in technology? Why did you then why did you want to create Coso.ai as well? So take me back in time.
Way back. Originally, I think I got into technology through video games, probably. So back like the PlayStation 1, Game Boy Color, when I was very young, and then just play video games the whole way through school and all that. Tried to kind of become a professional video game or
Cool.
For a few years. That was like my main focus, to be honest. It isn't like leaving cert to college age.
How did that go?
Not great.
I heard it's a tough kind of industry.
It also wasn't really a thing back then.
Okay.
But yeah, I got to 35th in the world in Call of Duty Black Ops back in the day.
That's cool. In Call of Duty Black Ops, you guys said 35th in the world. That's cool. That's a very popular game.
Yeah, no, it's good. So even if the startup becomes a unicorn, I think statistically that would be my best ever achievement. Okay, the competition. And League of Legends, I used to play kind of semi-professional streamed tournaments and stuff.
Okay, League of Legends, you played that professionally?
Not professionally, no, but like pretty high level. And then I was coaching a team that was trying to go pro for a bit as well. I was in colleges. Anyway,
you were coaching a team of what, sir?
I was coaching like basically a team that was trying into the Challengers series, which is like the gateway into the professional LCS stuff.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Anyway, tangential to the startup.
That's cool. No, but that's how you then, were interested overall in technology for a long time, in video games and so on.
Yeah, so I went to college to do computer science because I always made video games.
Cool.
I was like, that's the other way forward. Halfway through college, kind of realized that game development, you get paid about a quarter per hour compared to any other tech job. So you get paid half as much and you end up working twice as long hours. So that didn't seem attractive to me. And then almost dropped out of college, didn't really know what else I'd do. So but then I got an internship for a finance company in Dublin. I was in college in Cork. Moved to Dublin for that. And then when I was kind of working practically in industry, actually solving real problems, I was like, oh, okay, this kind of tickles my brain nicely.
I'd heard people compare programming with playing a game.
Yeah, I mean, there is comparisons. I've never personally, I do like, sort of, I guess. Your problem solving
in that sense.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, and then so I ended up there after they offered me a graduate job with it if I finished the degree. So I finished the degree, came back as a graduate. I worked there for a couple of years, ended up spending a year as a security engineer there.
In Susquehanna.
Yeah. So they're like a high frequency trading firm. So like algorithms on servers trade millions of stocks every day, back and forth for a fraction of the cent profit. And they do that millions of times and they make millions of dollars.
So security is very important for that.
Yes, quite important. And then it's kind of got interested. I grew up in a double civil servant household, so like entrepreneurship wasn't really a thing on the radar. But when I was working there, I got interested in trading stocks, and then
Cool.
I started reading like books
Makes
about.
sense because you were in Susquehanna, so you were around that kind of environment where everyone is, well, I presume lots of people were trading.
Yeah, exactly. So like basically everyone that's kind of working there is, or a lot of people that are working there are very interested, even on the tech side, or still enough being interested in the stock market. So yeah, and then did that, got interested in stocks, got interested in business from the back of that, and then got basically interested in startups from the back of that, like gravitate towards reading about kind of startup, the upstarts, like Brad Stone book by Uber and Airbnb and stuff.
Okay.
It's like the Everything Store, like the Amazon book that he wrote, and like all these sorts of books.
What book was it? Say.
It's the Everything Store is like
Everything Store.
Yeah, it's like a really good book around Amazon that one of the first books I read around like startups.
Great.
And that's
I'm to read it. I haven't.
Yeah, it's really good. And he's got another one called The Upstarts that's about Uber and Airbnb.
Okay.
Which
I feel like I've heard of it, but
they're good at that. They're very like they kind of read like fiction, even though like they're like pretty much factual. There's probably a bit sanitized.
Okay, yeah, that's cool. Those are the very interesting ones.
Yeah, exactly. They're pretty easy like reads. But anyway, that, and then was working on a few startup ideas. Conversation in a pub all the way back in October 2018. My friend was working for a marketing agency, and basically they were telling us about this problem they had, where it was just an annoyance really. When they're onboarding a new client, they're kind of social media focused agency. You're going onto the feeds of the competitors of that client and kind of manually by hand scrolling through those feeds to kind of get a kind of a bootstrap strategy for their new client. Which is something that I found out after the fact that like marketers all over the world do that. They look at what works well for other similar companies and how they kind of co-opt that into a marketing strategy for their own client.
Yeah.
Super common practice. So they're doing that manually. So it seemed like something that could probably be automated. And then when I started looking into the problem a bit, kind of realized actually we could probably go a step further. We could automate the competitive analysis bit. Now to use that data to predict how well content will perform, suggest improvements, and ultimately generate content for the businesses. Yeah, so then that was 2018. I was kind of mid moving to Salesforce at that point, so I moved over to Salesforce, worked there for a year.
And in Salesforce, you worked on the back end of a social media platform.
But pure chance actually. I did flag it to my manager when they started, but obviously Coso was super early stages. Then it was basically just an idea. But yeah, by pure chance.
You'd already started working on the startup, and you were doing it part time while you were working in Salesforce.
I hadn't really decided which startup I was going to do. Like I was working on a few different ideas.
Cool.
I did.
And your manager was like, "Yeah, cool. Yeah, go for it."
He was like, "Yeah, sure, whatever." Yeah.
That's cool. I don't think everyone's manager would be sort of that relaxed about what could be considered moonlighting ultimately if it had succeeded.
Yeah. But it has kind of seduced. It just took.
Well, it has succeeded. Yes, yeah. But I mean, from his perspective at the time, yeah.
But yes, that was grand. And I was working on a few other ideas. I haven't even fully decided that this is the thing I was going to like formally, properly pursue. At the time I was working on some other ideas. So like I'd spent about 6 months trying to set up a new airline for a bit.
A new airline?
Yeah. So I was just trying to optimize the airline business model that using on short haul flights and like get rid of luggage. No one gets checked luggage. You do like you do freight instead of checked luggage, then you can discount the tickets for consumers and you operate shorter. There's all these.
Okay.
So I'm going to go with a new business model and that didn't really work out. It's quite capital intensive to start an airline.
Yeah.
So as
I think anywhere is probably capital intensive to start an airline.
Turns out as like 22-year-old with no business pedigree in Ireland, there's some barriers to that.
You can say that to Richard Branson.
Yeah. Well, actually, if I knew now what I like, if I went back now knowing what I know now, it is probably have a better.
Yeah.
I don't know if the business model would have ever worked.
Fair.
But tried to do that and then a couple other things. Yeah.
So you were trying out a few different ideas. How did you pick Coso? Like, how was it that you decided to go down the social media route? Like, I think this is an interesting sort of topic of like when you want to start. So you knew that you wanted to start a startup, so that was the first thing. And then it was about, okay, what's your startup going to do? What's the problem that you're going to solve? And I have heard others kind of talk about, exploring the, having this kind of exploration period and then going sort of all in on something.
Yeah.
Can you talk me through that process a little bit? And then why was it that you decided to go with sort of social media optimization?
Yeah, I think the we don't really do social media optimization,
Sorry, I said this wrong. Okay.
but I think to
Social media automation?
we replace marketing agencies.
Okay, that's it. Okay.
So marketing agencies are slow and expensive. We use AI to do most of the work they do.
Okay.
And if you're a marketing agency, you can use our product to basically have higher margin or service more customers.
Great.
If you're a small business, you use us instead of an agency.
Great. So you partner with marketing agencies or you work directly with small businesses. Great.
And basically we create all their social media content right now. We're going to expand beyond that. But
Perfect.
yeah, basically in the same way an agency does, we just have that kind of fully automated.
Perfect.
Kind of jumping
So why did you decide to go with this?
It's just the idea that I kept coming back to over that kind of exploratory period.
In why?
I think originally it was the engineering problem was like really nice.
Okay.
Because I had some experience, like my thesis in college was with the original generative AI, which is a generative neural network, or it's a technology called neural evolution of augmented topologies, which is basically a neural network that, as it's learning, alters its own architecture in terms of like what nodes it connects to what nodes to learn whatever task it's being applied to.
Okay.
And my thesis in college was building one of those architected neural networks that evolved its topology to basically learn strategies for a game called Othello, which for most people I just say chess, because you can functionally think of chess.
Great.
Basically program it on all the rules of chess, and then it simulates loads of games against itself to learn winning strategies.
Okay.
So that was my thesis in college.
Yeah.
And so a bit of AI, not like PhD level, but I put together AI.
Yeah. That's very AI. Yeah.
And then so that was really so that like the internet I could take that, which was super interesting. The first like lecture I had on AI in college, I was like, oh, this is amazing. I want to work in this somehow in future. At the time, you had to kind of work in like you basically go do a PhD. That's how you work in AI back in 2016 time.
Yeah.
There's no these like app layer Gen AI companies floating around. So yeah, we started working on that. So basically from an engineering perspective, like it really caught me, like I just fell in love with the engineering problem, because the main bottleneck for building, there's two bottlenecks really for building AI systems, but one of the main bottlenecks is labeling data.
Yeah.
So you typically need a human to go like table, chair, microphone, laptop, and that's a massive bottleneck. With social media specifically, you don't have that bottleneck because all the content is inherently scored.
In what way?
So you have engagement metrics for social media. So you have like likes, comments, shares. So that means if a post goes up and it gets loads of likes, it's a great post. So then you can build some sort of system that goes, okay, cool, this is a good post, without having to actually label data yourself, which is really interesting from an engineering perspective. Because okay, cool, this unlocks so many possibilities.
Yes.
So I think that's that kind of realization was like, oh, cool.
Yeah.
And they were like, and how do we do this at scale? We're like, well, pretty much every company in the world has their social media on their website. So you don't need to, especially if you have a company, you can get their social media on their website, and you can get the data from their social media feed and then evaluate their content.
Yeah.
And then you can start doing searches for like clusters of similar companies and like get all their social media feeds and then evaluate all their content.
Yeah.
And then you can use that to predict how well a post from a different company will perform.
Yeah.
Targeting similar customers, similar niche, similar geography, whatever targeting. And then you can suggest improvements based on better versions of the posts from other companies.
Okay.
And then ultimately you could generate content. So we spent a couple of years trying to build our own models to do all that.
So you went full time from Susquehanna. You went fully into all of this.
Yeah. So back in like 2020, from Salesforce actually.
Mm-hmm.
Salesforce. Yeah. I went full time into doing all this. Yeah.
Cool.
Yes.
How did you find? So you started and kind of went full time in sort of 2020. How did you find sort of the COVID time period to work for you for the startup?
Yeah, I'd say it was pretty useful, to be honest. And there's nothing else to do.
Fair.
So yeah, it's a good time to reduce your income as well, because what are you going to spend money on?
Yeah, initially when you're starting off with a startup. Okay, so you kind of started looking at that this is a super interesting problem.
Yeah.
So how has it gone since then? What have you learned since then, or how has Coso.ai advanced?
Yeah, so I think we spent the first couple of years trying to build our own, for like figuring out how to start up was quite tough, because
Yeah.
like we're really plugged into like any sort of ecosystem, so
Yeah.
we're just trying to figure it out ourselves. Um, and then
I think that's quite common. It's, you know, like initially when you're trying to start a startup and you just don't know what you don't know at
yeah,
first.
exactly.
So it's about learning how to do a startup in, like, generally speaking, as well as trying to figure out your own problem that you're trying to work on, and like actually, building whatever problem, whatever solution that you need.
It's really hard to filter bad advice,
Yes. Okay.
because everyone's well intentioned, but there's bad advice comes from people who either they overfit your situation, their situation, and
Yeah.
tell you a lot of like exact like the ultimate truths, like, oh, you should always do this, you should never do that. No.
Oh my God, I love the AI term.
Yeah,
Oh,
exactly.
yeah. So so continue. Sorry, they overfish.
It's like your situation for a situation.
Yeah.
Something like, oh, you should never do this, you should always do that. It's like, actually, there is edge cases here, and maybe my situation fits into those edge cases, but like you haven't considered that before you give me the advice.
Yeah.
So like, rule of thumb we built up over a couple of years, like anyone who talks in absolutes, we basically just discard their advice.
Yeah.
Because there's almost no absolutes
Yes.
in terms of trying to build a huge startup.
Mm.
And
And how do you know which advice to even follow? This is
yeah, it's just an experience thing.
yeah.
There's no other way to go about it.
Yeah.
And so that was a big learning the first couple of years. And then, yeah, learning that, so like how to start navigate that whole thing without kind of being plugged into, like, there's people we talked to and stuff, but we weren't, like, in hindsight, probably should have just gone and played in San Francisco, but didn't know if that's what we should have done at the time,
Yeah. But you haven't yet,
Uh,
or have you?
I've gone to San Francisco. Yeah.
You've been to San, but you haven't moved to San Francisco in a way. Yeah.
No, we're there's a good chance we do our next fundraise in the US though.
Okay.
So we're kind of building connections over there at the moment. So
Oh, great. Yeah. Yeah. Fair. And is that something that you do see that is necessary to go to San Francisco to grow it?
I don't think it's necessary, but I think ultimately you're trying to reduce friction to success.
Yeah.
And being somewhere where even to live there, but like being involved in the ecosystem of somewhere where there's an awful lot of innovation, there's relatively low barriers to accessing capital,
Yeah.
and follow on capital as well. So if you get some capital and start going, there's access to a lot more.
Mm-hmm.
I think those two things. I think more so, to be honest, the innovation side of it, and being around and being plugged into networks of people building other, whether it's security for AI agents, or just other app layer Gen AI stuff, or even foundational model stuff, being around those people is only beneficial. Like the best conversations that we have with people in Dublin are this, it's a handful of startups in Dublin building really cool Gen AI stuff.
Yeah.
And the best conversations we have around like product or around strategy are in Dublin are often with the founders of those companies. So then you go somewhere like San Francisco, and Dublin's got a really good like small ecosystem of like really, really talented, great founders.
Yeah.
But like, strain the numbers or like wisdom of the crowds, you go somewhere that has 1,000 versus 20 or 30.
Yeah.
You're probably there's gonna be benefits to that.
Yeah. Makes sense. Okay, so possibly you might consider, like you said, especially for fundraising.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's go back to your product and how that's going. So you talked about how Coso.ai looks at what competitors have, and then sort of creates kind of content from that. Can you talk about some of the best practices that you've seen about how to create content, and then how you're sort of going about sort of automating that?
Yeah.
So for somebody that does want to create the best kind of content, what would you say to them?
So I think generally the more personalized it is to your specific like business or personality or as a person, typically those best stuff performs better. And the more generic something is, the worse it does.
So I'm gonna ask you a question now.
Yeah.
How do you figure out how do you figure out your brand voice in a way to make it personalized?
Yeah, I like a lot of this is preference. So I talk to companies that are very similar on the outside, and maybe they could even be competitors with each other. And there's no, objective reason that they should have different brand voice, but like
Yeah.
the founders of the two different companies will be like, I want to communicate this way, or I want to communicate this way.
Yeah.
And so it's like essentially combining that with like what should be interesting for people that aren't involved in company to kind of read or watch.
So that's very interesting. So you said even in competitor companies, there can be like different brand voices, which of course that, brand could be the competitive advantage. But just in the sense of there is no right answer to this. There's no sort of like one kind of brand voice for somebody that's searching for their brand voice there when they're creating content. There's no like, oh, we need to sort of get to like this kind of niche, as in the one right answer. It might be that they get to this kind of niche and it's specific to them. So would that be, do you see that like the decision on brand voice would be something internal to the company or startup, or do you see it as being, well, this is what we've seen our customers have, or probably like, or customers are looking for, or it's probably a mixture between the two?
Yeah, ideally we'd like our customers to just ask us and we tell them what we think is optimal. But in reality, like no one wants to.
Okay.
Everyone wants their own like unique, which they probably should. Like if everyone just really like, do we think this is optimal? Everyone did the same. Like we can become not optimal.
That's it.
And it's nice. So and most people want, there's like tactics you can employ like generically across the board. So like generally with social media content, you want to either educate, entertain, or emote. The third E there is squeezed, where it makes someone feel emotion. So like one for like startup founders that's like super accessible is the kind of make people feel emotional thing. Because you just talk about your founder journey and people, it resonates with people, and like every startup founder has a million different hurdles they've overcome. Even you could be at your startup a couple of weeks and you probably encountered 100 things that you can write, hurdles. Never mind if you're at it for like a few years, something that's an infinite amount of things you can talk about. So that's super.
Even if that's not relevant to the startup itself, if it's just about the startup, but not, the problem with the startup solving.
Yeah, you for organic content, you actually want to very rarely talk about what you're like selling directly. Obviously you want stuff to be related to what you're selling and the value proposition of that, and your target customers and all that stuff. But like literally, it's like, does this content entertain someone? Does it educate them, or does it make them feel emotion? And if it doesn't do either of the three, there's pretty much no point in both here.
Could you give some examples, and maybe some examples that you've seen specifically with Coso.ai that have worked quite well?
Yeah. So like the educate one is kind of the easiest one, especially for AI, which like multimedia or multimodal Gen AI. It's still like super early.
Yeah.
So it's quite hard to be entertained. LMs already have a sense of humor.
Yeah, because how can you tell what is entertaining when you're creating it? You want entertainment, of course, but how do you know if it's gonna land?
Exactly. Yeah. So you can do stuff like take memes and then like reformat the memes into like it's closer to like what you're yelling or whatever. Which is like a handy one, especially with the new kind of image models and stuff that have been back in work. Like the new OpenAI, like the the GPT-4o image.
Yeah.
That you
Generation.
feed in the image and then tell it to customize it another way.
Yeah.
And we have like that functionality kind of built into a product as a pipeline. But like the educational stuff, like tips that are related to your product. It's not like talk about your product, but if you're a physio, maybe you're talking about like how to recover from like an ankle injury from playing soccer. You're the type of clients you deal with, the people who play five-a-side on Wednesday and have ankle injuries because they don't warm up before they play five-a-side. To maybe something that is very close to home. But
you have personal experience.
Personal experience on it. But that's, so you're talking about like tips for like solving an injury. It's like, is someone engaged with that? Like, okay, cool, yeah, that's relevant for me. Or you could do, if you're more B2B, like a security sort of company, you could talk about, like I think we talked about this before we were in the Lion Club, like right, and like like interesting security policy stuff that people wouldn't necessarily. So like don't like turn off your password rotation policy or make it long. Is it a month or 3 months? Make it 2 years or something, and
That's a very controversial topic, as we were talking about.
Yeah. What is the best practice?
But right now, as we're filming in 2025, you want to have the longer password rotation policy rather than shorter. Yeah,
Exactly. So like every company can do like some sort of educational content, or like whether you're B2C or B2B, and whether you're product or service. There's
And how do you make that kind of so going back to the story of the educational content? How do you make that not be boring? Because so we've just talked about like password rotation practices. And okay, so maybe to ourselves it's interesting because maybe it's cybersecurity, but to somebody else it might be like, maybe it's about targeting the right audience.
Yeah.
But even then, it's possible to make this sound very boring. How do you kind of add a bit of, I guess, entertainment even to the education?
Yeah, so you can go loud. So it's like, how do you make it like resonate with someone?
Yeah.
So, like, oh, this actually and like narratives are super cool for that. So like, if you're talking about this, you're like, oh, maybe there's an example of a company that had a big data breach and it was because employees were just adding an extra like number to the end of their existing password because they have to rotate it every month.
Yeah.
Which is 100% happened.
Yeah.
So then you're like, okay, cool. So you're like, okay, what's the narrative? This is an interesting thing. Like, I'm going to go on a layer deeper, do like a ChatGPT search or something, find like an interesting story related to this. And it's like, oh, that will get way more engagement than this post in the raw tip.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It's like practical. And people see that, oh, yeah.
Adding kind of a storytelling aspect to the thing.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay.
So that'll do better. And then, so that's like emotional, educational, and then, and entertaining. I think we kind of covered all those.
So you're using AI with Coso to create this content.
Yeah.
So there's, I suppose, several things there. One of the big challenges that I'm hearing is this kind of trend towards people being over the equivalent of sort of AI generated content, or even worse, AI slop, which is just kind of not great sort of content created by AI. How do you, because you are using AI, how do you make it sound not AI in the content that you're creating? How do you make it be something that's personable and not just AI slop?
Yeah, so that's what we spent a lot of the last kind of 2 years solving. We still have improvements to make, but generally we found like the concept of templates super useful for that.
Okay.
So we have like image templates, we have text templates. So we have generic ones built into the system. So like based on viral post templates. And then you're telling the AI, basically, this is the brand, this is the kind of core bit of content's going to post, and then you're not create a post, but use this existing content as a template. Like generalized templates and stuff. So then you have an image that's created that looks visually similar to an existing image that did very well for this story content, either from from the client or the competitor, or from just like a general social media account. And similarly for the text, then you're like what we do is we download their social media feeds or their competitor's social media feeds, or just once again just general high performing content. We turn that content into templates that are generalized templates that you then feed into a large language model alongside a bit of content and random guidelines, and basically be like, for this brand, for this bit of content, create a post that fits this template. And we have like a decision logic built into the back end of the application that kind of decides what template to use for which bit of content. And then you can it's like, once we've figured that out, to be honest, it's like basically fully flexible. So like it can literally emulate like anyone's tone of voice, beyond people who are like very, very extreme. Because, there's always going to be like LMs are bad at predicting edge case stuff. They always want to go to the mean.
Yeah.
Even when you feed in templates.
Yeah.
But in general, you can kind of emulate any anyone who's in like the middle, like 90% of how they speak.
Yeah.
You can emulate their tone of voice if they're making graphics and such, and emulate their graphics. And that's kind of, you kind of solve the problem. But like, honestly, that was like that's been the single biggest problem with onboarding people to the platform, and actually running autonomous. Like, it's not fully autonomous. Like, you sign off on the content before it ever goes live.
Yeah.
So it's not automatically posting. But basically, essentially creating that content autonomously, giving back to the client. So the first person seeing the content is our customer, not ourselves internally.
Yeah.
Solving that has been like probably our biggest technical probably joint biggest technical challenge.
Yeah. Which is why you started this in the first place, because it was an interesting technical challenge. And it also helps people. Have you had any interesting success stories?
Yeah, I mean, so one of the big radio stations in Dublin that uses us, if you go onto our website, you can see which radio station it is. But they basically are, they had like a social media marketer like employed before they worked for us for like a year and a half or something. They were one of our first pilots that got on board, and they had a social media marketer employed before, and she just happened to quit a couple months before, and they hadn't placed her, so they hadn't been posting much on social media. And they found us and reached out, and we've worked with it for like a year and a half. And I just like super happy with this with the service. They're basically able to not have to employ another social media marketer.
Cool.
And we were able to do like add as much value as that person had added to. We've another case in the UK of like a company that were using natural agencies. They're paying an agency like £1,500 a month. For like, you know, they were getting a kind of a handful of hosts a month for like £1,500 or nearly €2,000. And I would ask you to plug that in for them, and they get a better service, and it's like more cost effective as well.
Yeah.
Which is super, super cool.
Great.
All right. So yeah, we're starting to get like a lot of those kind of case studies together. So.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. Yeah. Wow. That's like super, super fascinating. And I think it's definitely something that we can probably continue talking about.
Yeah.
For quite some time. But I think we have a slightly shorter episode for today.
Yeah, enough.
So yeah. So thank you so much for this, James.
Yeah.
Super fascinating conversation. We can definitely see if we can get you back on the podcast as well at some stage in the future.
Yeah.
This time to start on time, which is my fault. Sorry.
Yeah, no worries. Is there any security stuff that you want to ask me about before we?
Yeah. So, I mean, if you can share any kind of security best practices that you have when you're creating these AI agents.
Yeah, so I think in general, like the best, and like I guess our CTO that actually does more of this work now day to day is probably slightly better position to ask. Well,
and what's your role now?
So I'm the CEO, so I do like everything except developing the product is under my remit.
Yeah.
And in terms of actual product management, we do that kind of 50-50. But then Brendan, our CTO, is an amazing engineer. So basically just let Brendan just do the engineering.
Yeah.
And I do everything else to facilitate Brendan doing really good engineering. And I use contribute to the code bits. I do it less than now. But in general, I think we follow basically security best practices. Like we wrote, like obviously I previously worked as a security engineer. Brendan has also built secure applications.
But what are security best practices for AI agents? Because that's something that we're researching a lot and, you know, actively developing things for. What are your thoughts?
So I think like we were just talking earlier, you were educating me a bit around prompt injection, that sort of thing. I said obviously that's super important. But if you look at prompt injection, it's like, well, that's, you know, you're taking like SQL injection has been around for like decades. And I was like, okay, how do you take that security best practice and just like take it one layer deeper to AI agents and just apply it? I think that's the general like thing is like security is not being like overhauled.
Yes.
So it's like, okay, well, you need to encrypt your data when it's at rest. You need to encrypt your data when it's in transit.
Yeah.
You need to, you know, have externally facing APIs, some sort of authentication on them.
Yeah.
All that stuff.
Yeah.
It's just like, okay, well, you know, what's my list of security best practices, my NIST or whatever, and the ChatGPT can generate for you even at this point. And then it's like, okay, and how do I apply these to like an AI agent? You know, and it's just like that's the general framework.
The general framework, yeah. Going down into the details of it, it does become, you know, you have to kind of figure it out. Like for all of these things, it is a process. And maybe just a quick sort of final question on, like, in terms of when you were creating these AI agents, what are some of the best practices generally speaking there, because you've so much experience with creating AI and you have been doing this for several years now. So I'm sure you've come across some things that are maybe not so good, and it's hard to say, I know, because the AI agent space is changing so rapidly. But saying that, still I'd say you probably have some learnings there.
Yeah, I think you kind of want to try and get the agent to make as little decisions as possible. Is
what do you mean by that now?
So every time you get an LM to make a decision, it will basically do whatever the average thing is, or like the mean is. So if you just say generate a post for LinkedIn about X, like it'll create like to like ChatGPT.
Yeah.
It'll create like whatever it perceives like the average or like average good LinkedIn post about X. Whereas if the more data you can feed in, the more hand holding you can do, and you can do trying to the chain of thought kind of prompting. Where you're like, okay, this is the brand information, this is their target customers, this is their key messaging, this is their products and services they offer. This examples their existing content, this examples content from competitors, this examples of like generally good content, and bang all that in, then you can get a lot more deterministic output.
Yeah.
I think that kind of framework applies for like lots of use cases beyond just like social media content.
Yeah.
The more context, I guess context engineering is like the hot buzz.
The latest thing right now, yes.
The more context you can give to an AI agent, the better performance it's going to give.
Yeah. So it doesn't have to sort of make things up or hallucinate, even like tone of voice or anything like that.
Exactly, yeah. And that's the other thing as well in terms of specifically use maybe this kind of for social media content. But like we found like telling it to verify its sources per stuff actually reduces, like they're a lot better at not hallucinating than they were a couple months ago, like the per models. But there's just still edge cases. Whereas if you tell it to only use sources that it can like independently verify, or like even listed sources in the response, hallucination goes down an awful lot more again.
Right.
Which is super useful. So I feel like there's probably other aspects beyond probably social media where you kind of leverage that sort of framework. Where if it's doing any sort of research for you, it's like make sure you return the sources for this as well, or double check the sources, or even like do a second call, potentially do a different model where like validates the stats and facts from this, include sources, and then you kind of get the two of them checking each other's work is like very unlikely to hallucinate at this point. There still will be the odd edge case, but at that point, if you have two LLMs, two current gen modern LLMs like Gemini 2.5 Pro and GPT-03 independently verifying each other, like you're kind of down to like human error rates at that point.
Yes, but
or not far off. I don't actually have the stats right now, but that's kind of how we think about it.
One thing that I discussed yesterday, also another podcast that will come out, is around how do you actually ensure these kind of non-functional requirements when you're creating these AI agents. So how do you ensure? We were specifically talking. So we talked about security, and then also like price and reliability as well, and also I suppose performance is another sort of big one. Like I know that as you start getting the AI agents to essentially do more tasks, there can be a sort of compounding error rate in terms of its accuracy as well.
Yes.
What are some tips that you have found to have worked for Coso or in general?
For Inc.
So when you're creating these AI agents, making sure that the cost isn't going to be extortionate in some ways, and making sure that that the accuracy stays good, as you keep adding on more tasks. So say for example, if we talked about not as much hallucinations now, and you can kind of verify between them, but if there was to be some kind of hallucination, one task relies on another task, and how do you make sure that sort of...
Yeah, I think you kind of want to have as much kind of figured out in terms of like cold data as you can. So like in terms of like you want to have, rather than have the AI agent make up what it's doing in every step along the way, if it's some sort of sequence of stuff that happens repeatedly, you're logging that in like your database or whatever. So then like in between each steps, it's referencing something that's like some sort of static data.
So it's about the memory in a way.
Yeah, like the storage. Yeah, so you basically you're trying to get the LLM to do as little of its own decision making as possible, and ideally
that's the general principle.
Yeah, and then ideally you're making it so that it doesn't make like recursive decisions based on decisions that it's made into like white. You don't want to have it like making white space decisions.
Okay.
As little as possible.
What? Sorry, white one.
Like white space decision. So like
What would you consider white space decision?
Going back to like the original example of like create a LinkedIn post about the latest cybersecurity news, like very white space. It could come back with anything.
Yeah.
Or if you create a social media post about the latest cybersecurity.
Yeah.
Whereas,
So
if you're feeding it
it's
more.
it's very like non-deterministic.
Exactly, yeah. So then you want as little as possible. It's like not relying on obviously relying on the LLM for everything is a super handy way to get like an MVP sort of thing together. When you're actually looking at production applications, there's a huge, it's kind of an iceberg problem.
Yeah.
We're trying to make it more deterministic and trying to reduce the decision making and trying to minimize the steps that the large language model is actually taking on itself.
Yeah.
Because you can very quickly, in terms of like reliability, get into, it's made 3 like heuristic based decisions or 3 approximations, and I was making a 4th decision based on 3 approximations.
Yep.
None of them are exactly correct.
Yes.
And then the 4th decision is like, wait.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think having static data that it references in between decisions, I think generally the way to avoid that.
Yeah.
And then in terms of cost as well, like also the house with cost, but then you obviously want to have a rough idea of how much like what context window is dealing with, what sort of payload size you're sending back and forth to the API. And if you can run testing and kind of run some small testing and then use some basic maths to figure out roughly what is your cost, and then having limited retries or timeouts as well. Something that we
unlimited or limited
limited retries and timeouts and stuff. Like some of our things are like not fully reliable yet, so like, but we'll get the LM to do it multiple times to get a response back. Well, like for one of our processes, like finding interesting use for a company and like little agent. We've got about 20 different agents active in Coso doing different things.
Cool.
About 50 or 60 kind of independent kind of probs that run to like get a social media post out. But like one of those kind of agentic processes will like find interesting news for a business. But like we cap that retry. I think it's capped at like 3 times at the moment. So if it tries to find interesting news, it will try it again. Because sometimes we'll find it the second time, might find it the third time, but like after that we don't want to be in a loop for like hours, running 100 times trying to find it. Like it'll just report back to news that it couldn't find interesting news.
Yeah, makes sense.
And then it's our job to kind of flag that and then improve it so that it can next time find it within 3 retries.
Makes sense.
And having that kind of something we need to improve ourselves is having monitoring of that or in the application.
Yeah,
it's kind of like a secondary order thing that we kind of need to start working on to in practice improve those flows.
Makes sense. And have you found any particular frameworks? I know they're all changing, but for creating AI agents to be particularly helpful?
I have to ask Brendan, our CTO, for exactly what we're using right now for all that stuff.
You don't have to share that, but like in general.
I think in general we found that just figuring it out ourselves is the like we're looking to like LangChain and we're looking into some of those tools and like
Coso.ai and that stuff.
Yeah, to be honest, the amount you need to figure out to make those work, there's very little added benefit to just what we found so far, at least. And I'm sure there's, this might not be a hard and fast rule, but we found there's limited benefit to using those sorts of third-party frameworks. Compared to how much you need to figure out just to make them work anyway. You might as well just be using your own stuff. And is what we found in general. Now we may be leveraging it with some parts of the stuff.
Makes sense. Cool. Very, very, very interesting. This is I definitely heard like different opinions on this, and I think in general, like the more of a the more that you've been working on this for some time and you kind of learned what are some of the best practices, the more you're able to kind of shape the thing you're working on to what you need rather than sort of using many existing tools or frameworks.
It's just those things are moving so rapidly that like if something happens, there's a new LM out today or there's a new API or there's something, like we'll have movement like by Monday into our product. Whereas if we're reliant on like third-party framework, it's like 2 months later before it gets pushed into their release. And
like from that aspect as well.
There's I don't know, there's exponentially more value in being like dynamic. And while the whole topology of the like ecosystem is changing every week or every month, and there's like cool when things settle down in a couple of years, we like have there's less innovation happening. Like how can we take this part of our product and like map it to a framework so that we don't have to manage it as much? Once things are more static. I think that's probably for databases we use our Aurora AWS Aurora database like Postgres instance. We're not rolling our own database because that's like a solved problem.
Exactly.
Right.
Yes.
Or if the database was the innovations,
Yes.
it's just be managing it ourselves so that we can iterate quickly on it.
I completely agree with this. Like even the concept of like auth systems, for example, you know, and using things like is existing systems like Supabase or something like that's already kind of out there, especially for this exact reason, because it is a solved problem. It's not the thing that like you're ultimately like trying to
Innovate on.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Completely agree with this. Yeah, that's super interesting. Yeah. Awesome. So I think, will we wrap it up there, or
Sure, yeah.
any final thoughts before we wrap it up?
No. Security's important. Yeah.
Love it.
We were just talking before this, right? There's some trucking company that's like 180 years old or something that went bust last week because they had a ransomware attack they couldn't pay.
Yeah, a trucking company. Yeah.
And they weren't obviously a trucking company 200 years ago, but they're afraid of logistics or something. And
Yeah. So yeah, take care of your security, and yeah. And use Coso.ai.
Yes, social media is not something you should be focusing innovation time on either. So you might as well use Coso, or else you have to pay an agency a lot of money. As a founder, most founders end up doing social media themselves, and it's like 5 p.m. on a classic thing, 5 p.m. on a Friday, and you're like, I never did that post, and I got it's my weekend now. I don't want to do it.
Yeah.
So like we basically solved that problem. So
No.
Friday morning, you'll get a notification of created your content for the following week, and you just go and you just approve the content, make any quick edits if you want. And once you approve it, then it goes out on all your social media channels at the scheduled time.
Amazing.
Yep.
I love it. Great. So thank you so much for this super interesting podcast episode, James.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. And for everyone listening, thank you also. I hope you enjoyed the episode. So if you did, once again, make sure that you like this episode, that you follow us on whatever platform that you're on, and that you share it with all of your friends as well. So thank you, everyone.